Just a quick thing about conspiracy theories. For me, it's just sometimes captivating how far can one's mind go. Thing to be aware of here is group thinking, which means that when there's a group that thinks one way, an individual may be unable to dissociate his or her own thinking from the group, which may lead to a problem there. So, yeah.
With conspiracy theories, I'm more interested with how come people actually believe a lot of them as well, and not only just, regular people, but also people that have powerful positions, because a lot of times there's a lot of these conspiracy theories that are going around, and then you might think that it's one of the people who's not educated that would believe it, but at the same time there's a lot of people out there who actually do, and I'm very interested in finding out what actually, how the pervasiveness of conspiracy theories leads to people actually believing it.
Conspiracy theories. It's a fascinating topic. How far can one's mind go? And are conspiracy theories always wrong? Before we can answer all those questions, it's important to know what conspiracy theories are.
Conspiracy theory is a way of explaining the world and what happens in the world. And it makes the claim that there is a group of people that has some kind of special powers and is able to manipulate other people to their own ends. So they have some kind of hidden agenda. And the function of a conspiracy theory is to explain who this group of people is, what their agenda is, and bring to light their activities.
Maybe an example of a popular conspiracy theory can help to clarify this.
One example of a conspiracy theory is the so-called shape-shifting lizards theory. And that theory states that actually the people in power, for instance many politicians, are actually not humans, but they are shape-shifting lizards or reptilians. And there are all kinds of explanations for how this state of affairs came to being. So, for instance, one explanation is that they landed on Earth from somewhere in space, and what they want to do is control as humans. And for instance, one piece of evidence for this you can see on YouTube, where Barack Obama, so the former US president, is seen, supposedly, to be changing shape from a human to a lizard.
Okay, we now know what a conspiracy theory is, but in which shapes can we encounter them?
Conspiracy theories can appear in many different shapes and forms. So, for instance, you might encounter them in the shape of memes, which are a very specific way of presenting conspiracy theory or elements of conspiracy theory, because there's not much room for explanation necessarily. But that's not the only form. You can have very long videos, for instance, giving a whole account of an entire theory. Sometimes it comes in the form of interaction. So you have a lot of people, for instance, on a discussion forum, each of them adding different pieces to the theory. It can be a written account. It can be just a statement sometimes that other people then start working on, so to speak, and try to find evidence for it. So really it becomes, conspiracy theories come to you in many different shapes and forms.
Is a conspiracy theory always false? Or are there also conspiracy theories that turn out to be true?
Conspiracy theories are not by default true or false. So there are conspiracy theories that have proven to be correct. So we cannot dismiss all of them by default. But at the same time, it's important to remember that many conspiracy theories are indeed false and have nothing to do with reality and the actual state of affairs.
So conspiracy theories can be true. Does that mean that conspiracy theories are never harmful? Or should we be worried about them?
I think there are definitely differences in conspiracy theories in terms of how dangerous they are or how harmless they are. And especially when you get to, so some of it can be just simply very entertaining. although, I mean, this is where you get to difficulty, because also entertaining conspiracy theories can have consequences offline or in actual life. Like, for instance, whether there are UFOs or not. For a lot of people, that just remains kind of a funny, haha, kind of thing, which has no consequences at all. But if you start invading Area 51 with huge groups of people to check, are there UFOs or not, then of course, I mean, it can have consequences. But even so, I think there are differences. So conspiracy theories that would target specific groups in society, minorities, for instance, or it can be majority even, I mean, that doesn't really make a difference, but minorities would be more vulnerable by default, but because of their minority position. And once you start making another group of people your enemy, I think you are potentially in dangerous grounds. So that's definitely one type that is more dangerous. But then you can think of all kinds of other things, like the Pizzagate theory, which, I mean, it was about powerful people, right? That Hillary Clinton and her associates were running the child pornography, whatever, slave ring in this pizza place. So it's not about minorities, it's about people in power. And still had really actually dramatic consequences, in the sense that eventually there was this guy who took a gun and decided to go to this pizza place because he wanted to see what the war was going on and maybe rescue these children who were supposedly there in the basement as prisoners. So again, you could say harmless on the surface, but the consequence was quite dramatic and potentially very grave, because there's a person with a gun.
We now know what conspiracy theories are, where we can find them, and whether or not they are harmful. But how can we explain conspiracy theories? First, let's have a look at how they start.
So the question, how do conspiracy theories start and how they come into being? First of all, I think it's important to remember that many of them start as jokes and just pure trolling. So you have people who enjoy watching other people online, especially, to run around trying to figure out a conspiracy theory while they are there behind their computers, laughing and having a good time. So that's one way in which conspiracy theories get started. Then there are all kinds of other explanations, psychological and social. And the psychological thinking states that you need to have some kind of mental disorder, for instance, paranoia, to get into conspiracy thinking. And that's, of course, one way of explaining it, an important one. I'm not saying that that doesn't explain anything, but there are also very important social dimensions and functions to conspiracy theories. So on one level, for example, it has been found that if there is a lot of change going on in the world and in society, conspiracy theories become more common. And that kind of makes sense, because if there is a lot of sudden change going on, humans will want to figure out what exactly is going on. But rather than trying to understand maybe the complex and complicated ways in which the world changes, you go more for a more simple explanation. And that's where conspiracy theories come in. There is also a further social dimension to conspiracy theories, which is that, in particular, maybe when there are things going on in the world that you find difficult to understand and comprehend, and difficult to find an explanation for, rather than thinking about the complicated way in which the world sometimes works, you go for a more simple explanation. And in particular, in situations where you may find yourself in a position where you feel like you're being discriminated against, or the world is dangerous for you, or the world is somehow working against you, it might be interesting for some people to, rather than explain the world and what is happening, to try and find a scapegoat, so somebody to blame, that it's somebody's fault. And one example of that would be the COVID-19 coronavirus, where people have all kinds of theories, for instance, about 5G networks and how they are to blame for everything. So rather than trying to figure out the actual state of affairs, it's sometimes, unfortunately, easier to try and find somebody to blame.
Once a conspiracy theory has started, you need people who believe in that theory to make sure it gets further spread. But why do people believe in a conspiracy theory?
I don't think young people who come up with conspiracy theories are necessarily crazy at all. That relates to the psychological explanations. So traditionally we think of conspiracy theorists as tinfoil hat people. There's something wrong with them psychologically. They might be paranoid, for instance. And I'm not saying that that never happens, but there are all these social reasons for why people want to engage with conspiracy theories and why they might believe them to be true. So questions of identity and belonging to a certain group and trying to find a simple explanation for the world, or maybe the conspiracy theory can be very complex as well in shape, but a simple explanation in the sense that you don't need to think about all the complexities going on in the world. You may find, for example, an easy scapegoat or somebody to blame. Conspiracy theories also have social functions in the sense that they are about identity. And that's a very important dimension in conspiracy theorizing. And what I mean by that is that if you are a member of a conspiracy theory group, you may have the idea that you are a very special person because you are somebody who actually knows the truth. Unlike all the other stupid people who believe, for instance, mainstream explanations, you are somebody that is special and has access to special kinds of knowledge. So then it becomes a question of identity. So you become really somebody special. Further reasons for why people would believe conspiracy theories is that, especially nowadays online, they often become in a very exciting and accessible format. They are very sensational a lot of the time. They give very exciting accounts of what is happening in the world, so that's one obvious attraction. And then as to their shape, they often become in the shape of memes, which for younger people especially can be extremely exciting and interesting, or YouTube videos, which gives maybe an aura of attraction to them as well.
Is there anything else we should take into account when we want to understand why people believe in conspiracy theories?
For the question why people believe in conspiracy theories, I think it's important to also consider the role of the media, the kinds of media that we have, and especially nowadays the role of the internet. And if you compare today's world to pre-digital times, or the times when the internet was not a mass form of communication, the world is very different. It's very different in the sense that before the internet was a mass form of communication, maybe you had a very interesting conspiracy theory in your mind, but you were not able to find anybody to talk to who would share this idea or get similarly excited about it. Nowadays, in online environments, it's rather easy to find people to go along. So the role of the internet there is quite important in the sense that it has removed some of the stigma that is related to conspiracy theories. Another useful thing to think about is why you would believe something. And we often have the idea that seeing is believing, that once you see visual evidence of something, that it must be true. So pictures would be more reliable, or video would be more reliable than written text. That, of course, can be a very, very dangerous way of thinking about things, especially nowadays with all kinds of online and digital media. It's very easy, even for people who don't have many special media or digital skills, to modify images and video. So the fact that you see visual evidence, pictures or video of something, it doesn't mean that it's necessarily true at all.
Are there people who are more vulnerable to believing a conspiracy theory than others?
I think people who find themselves in a vulnerable position somehow would be most susceptible to conspiracy theories. For a number of reasons. I think the most important might be that if you find the world difficult to understand or somehow working against you, you would be more likely to be attracted to theories that give you a simple enemy, or it's these people who I can blame for everything that is happening to me. And people who are somehow vulnerable, for instance, that they have difficulties in their life, maybe they are also more keen to find more extreme forms of entertainment or sensational content that somehow gives them meaning